Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time of day you're seeing this presentation. My name is Dave Baker. I am the Region 8 Vice President for MRTA. I'm also not sure if my presentation will proceed or follow that of my good friend and mentor, Richard Phillips, but you will hear several common threads running between our presentations. I've learned a great deal over the past year from both Richard and my other mentor and friend, Randy McLean, who is MRTA's State Legislative Chairperson. These two gentlemen, along with Nancy Craig, Fred Price, Julia Platt, and Arletta Goodwin, were instrumental in hiring our new director, Maria Walden. And with Maria, I know that we have one of the most talented, well-connected, and respected leaders in Jefferson City, something I know we're all thankful for. When I joined MRTA as an associate member in 2019, I did not have intent on becoming active in the organization upon my retirement. That changed pretty quickly. I now consider myself a public education advocate. When I make that statement, I quickly follow it with a statement that I'm also a constructive critic of public education. It is my firm belief that you cannot be an effective advocate for anything worthwhile if you're not willing to recognize its shortcomings, and if you're not willing to derive solutions from the problems that we know exist. My current work in St. Louis focuses on connecting the future workforce with business and industry. I contend that public schools still place too much emphasis on sending students to college with little knowledge and little exploration of the careers that exist in their communities. Statistics tell us that consistently 50% of the individuals in the United States that begin a bachelor's degree will not complete that degree. However, almost all individuals who come through public school will go to work. It's important that we improve the connection of students to the career opportunities in their communities that need participation. Again, that's one of the areas where I'm critical of public education, where it needs to improve. But that being said, citizens and elected officials in this state must admit that public education and teachers are asked to do much more than they're trained for and than they're compensated to do. Richard Hazard will discuss the fact that Missouri is at the bottom in regard to teacher compensation and per pupil expenditure. And although we are all retired, I know that this weighs heavily on so many of us. Missouri is approximately $2,000 behind top tier states in per pupil annual spending. So think of what that $2,000 could do per year per student for the schools, for the public schools in Missouri. Richard's point is well taken, and again, he's not made that yet, he's going to. But it's that who is better than MRTA to advocate for stronger and better public education, which has the intended consequence of strengthening PSRS peers. A good, strong public education system will ensure that we have a good, strong retirement system. Going back to when I became involved in MRTA, really it was last year, it was in the spring of 2021. I became aware of House Bill 439, sponsored by Bishop Davidson, District 130 out of Republic. This bill, there were several obviously last year in 2021 that would have been detrimental to education. This one in particular caught my attention, primarily because I felt it promoted a lack of respect for the profession of teaching. In Bishop Davidson's Bill 439, public school districts could issue their own teaching permits without going through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And at that time, according to Bishop Davidson's bill, all you would need was an associate's degree and a clean background check. That would allow you to teach any subject at any grade level without any further training or any other training, no student teaching. So I felt that the indication there was that anybody could teach. You didn't have to have any special training. You didn't have to be skilled at your craft. You could just do that. One of the talking points that I put in the email that I sent out to hundreds of teachers, active teachers, who were within Bishop Davidson's congressional district, was the idea of the fact that Bishop Davidson would not certainly promote legislation that would allow a city council or a mayor to issue a medical license or a law license for someone to practice medicine or law, but it was okay for teachers. It was okay because anyone could do that. So we'll just have the district provide a teaching permit to anyone who has that associate's degree. So I thought that was a significant lack of respect. Bishop Davidson likely had some pertinent points. I know that we have a teacher shortage. We certainly did last year also. And we are having difficulty in some of our rural districts finding teachers in certain subject matter areas or teachers at certain grade levels. But this was a Band-Aid approach to fixing a problem that had much deeper roots. And part of the reason is because over the last decade, our legislators have consistently beaten up on public education. We're defunding it. Again, we've talked about how low our teacher salaries are, and we've really taken a lot of respect out of the realm of being a teacher. So we have people not going into that profession. We have our schools across the state that have teacher education programs that have significantly low enrollment. But because of all the negative press regarding public education, obviously that's having a negative impact on young people deciding that they'd like this to be their profession. So again, when I was sending all those email out, I was doing everything I could to use the things that I knew about education and how it should be respected to try to oppose the bill that Bishop Davidson had out there. Now that bill did make it through the House. It died in committee in the Senate, but that bill, accompanied with the bill we were all paying attention to that did pass through the House and did pass through the Senate and was signed by the governor last year, which was Phil Cristofanelli's House Bill 349. Those two bills combined, I think, again, showed a significant lack of respect for public education. So Cristofanelli's bill is the Empowerment Scholarship Bill, which will give opportunity for individuals to contribute to empowerment scholarships and take tax deductions on those. And again, tax dollars leaving the state, which we know eventually are going to leave public education. I believe that when those tax dollars are lost, legislators at some point are going to come looking for those tax dollars, and I believe they'll begin looking for them in the education, the foundation formula. They'll blame the reason for the necessity of empowerment scholarships in charter schools. They'll blame that on public education, and I think they'll try to recoup the dollars through that. I think that at times we have lost sight, MRTA and other educational organizations, about the latter point, about the loss of respect for public education and public education teachers. MRTA's primary role during the past several general sessions has been reaction to legislation that's been adverse to public education and our retirement system. Now, enter our new executive director, Maria Walden, and MRTA's ability to begin creating strong partnerships with other educational organizations in order to present a unified and effective front, allowing us to effect the construction of legislation that fosters and promotes positive changes in public education. I spent most of my career in St. Louis County, but I grew up in a small town, Bonne Terre, Missouri, about 60 miles south of St. Louis. I am, and I'll always be proud to be a North County Raider. So I must admit that I'm frustrated with so much discussion about St. Louis and Kansas City and the focus of underperforming schools in those regions. Yes, there are unique challenges to urban and suburban area, public schools. And yes, those metropolitan areas have significant financial impact on all of Missouri. There is no argument about either of those two things. However, I contend that it is our small towns and rural communities that give Missouri its identity. And quite frankly, that's where most of our local elected officials reside. I'm not sure if he's there with you at the conference, but I'd like to recognize Mr. Jack Poston as one of many teachers who influenced me to become a teacher. I know most of you know Jack, a leader in MRTA for years, a past president. And I'm sure you're not surprised that Jack had a lasting impression on me and other students that he taught. So thank you, Jack, for that. But I could go on. Ms. Jenkins, Coach Matt Howe, Ms. Sharon Thurlkill, Ms. Pat Bockenkamp, Ms. Delane Schlemeyer, Mr. Rich Kern, and so many others that left a deep impression on me and my world. These teachers in that local school helped to raise me. They taught me integrity, commitment, working through difficulty. They taught me kindness. They were present at football games, choir concerts, school plays. I saw them at church, at local restaurants, grocery stores. And in Bonne Terre and Deloge, the sister city to Bonne Terre, the North County R1 school district, along with churches, were the community. The community revolved around those two entities, the school and the churches. So getting into a little discussion here about advocacy. I'll give a football analogy. As a former football coach and player, and for coaches that are out there, you'll understand this, and hopefully those of you who are Kansas City Chiefs will pick up on it too. But I was an offensive lineman, and I wasn't very big. In high school, pretty good size, but when I got to college, I played a year of college football at Southwest Baptist in Bolivar. I had a lot of defensive linemen who were a lot bigger than I was. But early on, I learned from coaches that when you are smaller and you have a bigger opponent across the line from you, you have to use their momentum against them. Use that size advantage to your advantage. So if they want to go to the left, you take them to the left and get them out of the play. They want to go to the right, you do the same thing. Now, if they want to come down the middle, we were probably in a little bit of trouble. But if I could use their momentum against them, then I could gain the advantage. And I think that's what we have to really consider when we talk about advocacy for public education. We have to figure out what are those topics and those ideas that we can use to our advantage to make sure that we begin to win this war of words and ideas in promoting the health and the security of public education. So I'll continue with the football analogy. This past season, North County had a good run in the Class 4 football state playoffs. And I had a chance to go down and see a couple of games. It was a mini homecoming for me, and I really enjoyed that. But I had a chance to talk to some people that I hadn't seen for years who were there watching games. I saw some guys that I played high school football with whose now, sons were playing and daughters were cheerleaders and things like that. So, but I was in the football venue. So I did some talking about public education, but I kept it related to that. I wanted to use where I was. It was a football game. I wanted to use that to my advantage and my talking points. So I actually had one conversation with a guy that I went to high school with, and I said, hey, you've been coming to games, and he told me, yes, his youngest son was playing on the team, and he had another son who'd played before. His daughter was involved in high school. He was an individual who was very involved in high school. And I knew that North County still meant a great deal to him, and being part of that community, coming to football games and going to basketball games and concerts was very important. So I said to him, I said, are you concerned at all that football and extracurricular activities in the state of Missouri could really be at risk? And he stopped and he looked at me and said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, because of so much legislation right now and so much promotion of charter schools and voucher programs, as tax dollars are lost and dollars for public schools are shifted other places, it's very possible that extracurriculars could be hurt eventually in some of our rural communities and our rural schools. And, we started having this conversation. He was very bothered by that, and he wanted to know a little bit more about it, so I gave him some more information. I also told him that his legislators in that area, Mike Henderson, Dale Wright, Elaine Gannon, were all very, significant advocates for public education. But it was a very good conversation. I felt when it was over, I felt as if I had made an impression on him because I talked about something that was valuable to him. So a few weeks after that, I heard Governor Parsons make the comment on a political television show. He said, people in Missouri live where they live because they want to live the way they want to live. Now, that's a little bit wordy, but his point there was people want their communities to stay the way they are in many ways. You've heard a lot of talk, probably, if you've paid attention to state politics, about broadband expansion, taking the internet, and making sure that we have good, strong internet connections throughout the state, whether that be for farmers, whether that be for students. That's something that I think MRTA attaches itself to, because the idea is that if we want individuals to remain in rural communities, or if we want families to immigrate back to rural communities, we have to have good broadband. We have to have good amenities for them. And I contend that we have to have good, strong public schools, because you might have good internet, but you're not going to move back if there's not a good school for your child to attend. So again, using that to our advantage, how do we make that connection with different entities? Maybe that's the Farm Bureau. I know Richard either will or has already talked about that. I think that's an organization that we align ourselves with because our values are very much the same. We want good, strong communities, and they see it as being, advocacy for farmers, advocacy for broadband. I see it as advocacy for public education. We need to align and use those strengths and that momentum to our advantage. I started my teaching career at Farmington High School, and I remember meeting Mr. Kenny Graham, who was an exceptional agriculture teacher and whose elective classes were some of the first every year to fill. When I began as principal at South Technical High School in 2002, I was immediately reminded of the positive impact that Kenny had on students and the impacts of career and ag education and the exemplary organizations across the state that are associated with agriculture education in our rural communities. Skills USA, Future Farmers of America, 4-H. Those organizations are great organizations for young people, and they only exist in public schools and primarily in our rural school districts. Recently, I had the opportunity to attend the Show Me Curriculum Administrators Association conference at Lake of the Ozarks. As a matter of fact, it was just last week. And during that time, I got a chance to meet Dr. Greg Carter, who is Greg is the coordinator of elementary teaching and learning in the West Plains School District, a rural school district right there in South Central Missouri. And Greg and I had a really good conversation about politics and about legislation and strength and health of public schools. And it was funny, I had just been on the West Plains district website not too long before that, because I was going through some different school district websites, seeing if I could get teacher email, because I had done that again working against Bishop Davidson's bill, and I wanted to see if that was something I could do across the state, and pretty much I was able to do that. But I remember their mascot name, the Zizzers, and Dr. Carter was pretty impressed with that, and obviously I think that name has that mascot name has some real special meaning around that area. But again, it just shows the pride of many of our local communities and their schools. If you drive across the state, how many water towers will you see that have the mascot name of the local school district on that water tower? It's something, again, very near and dear to so many people in our small towns and rural communities. I got a chance that next morning at the conference to sit in on their first presentation of the day, which was done by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It was a presentation about MSIP 6, the Missouri School Improvement Plan. If you're not familiar with that, that is the program through DESE that allows districts to retain accreditation, and that is now moving into its 6th iteration. And I was very impressed with how the administrators, primarily from mostly small school districts, asking very sincere questions about what do we need to do to make sure our students are performing, to make sure our districts are meeting the criteria that DESE wants to make sure that they retain that accreditation. So again, I was pleased to have that opportunity, but again, very impressed with sincerity coming from so many of our rural school districts and their representatives. I think it's probably good for most of you to ask yourselves, how do you feel, how do your friends and neighbors feel about the public school district in your town and your community? And my guess is going to be that your opinion and their opinions are very high. They feel that teachers and administrators are sincere and competent and feel that their children are safe and that their values are being upheld in the classroom. So why are rural and small community elected officials advocating for charter school expansion and empowerment scholarships? It's a great question. And I'm wondering how many of you have asked any of your local legislators that same question. And if you haven't, I'd ask you to specifically ask them about House Bill 349 that was passed last year, that empowerment scholarships bill, and ask if they voted yes or no. And if they voted yes, just ask that simple question. How does an empowerment scholarship help our community? And see what answer they provide to you and see if it's one that you believe is sincere and really is one that's going to help your community school district. Many of the bills that promote charter school scholarships and vouchers are not being authored by our state legislators, our state legislators. These pieces of legislation frequently are created by think tanks like the American Legislative Council, that acronym is ALEC, and they're provided to state legislators across the country for sponsorship in their respective legislatures. And unfortunately, too many citizens do not pay close attention to what happens in state government. And this is exactly why public education continues to take these direct hits with very little defense. So I'm so glad that all of you are active in MRTA and that you are concerned about learning more about legislative activity, that you're reading the things that Randy sends out, you're reading the things that Maria sends out. so that we are informed ourselves, but we can also inform those others in our communities that we have to stand up for public education and advocate for it. This highlights the importance of MRTA establishing a proactive agenda that pervades our towns and communities and consistently highlights the value and success of public education in our state. Richard is going to talk about this again, or maybe he already has, this idea that we have our general session from January through May, but our organization has to be very active as we move into that off season, June through December. We've got to get out into Rotary clubs and Lions clubs and Kiwanis clubs and chambers of commerce. We've got to get people who are willing to and want to go and speak to those organizations to talk about all the successes that we're having in public education. It's just not highlighted enough. We have to remind those local leaders about, jobs that are provided by our community schools. Sarah and I are working on a little bit of a project right now, looking at the largest employers in every county across the state. We're gathering that data. And I'm fairly certain that when we have that data completed, when we have that complete set, we're going to see that in our counties across the state, in many of our counties, our school districts are either our largest or one of our largest employers. And again, using those things that work to our advantage to advocate for public education. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today. Again, I know you're going to have some very good sessions coming up. I know Maria is going to be talking about strategic planning and where we go from here. But I hope that this gives you a little insight into my thoughts on advocating for public education, especially in our rural communities and our small towns, because I think that's something that's not received enough focus. Again, St. Louis and Kansas City, because they're those two large metropolitan areas, they get a lot of attention. And in some ways, rightly so. But it is our small towns and our small communities that really deserve the attention. And that's where so many good things are going on that we have to continually highlight. And again, we have to use that momentum. We have to use it to our advantage to make sure our public schools stay strong. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you today, and have a good rest of the conference.